A financial strain on Spirit AeroSystems, leaving more furloughs and layoffs as a possibility. That is from a federal filing from Spirit on Tuesday.
It's a direct impact from the issues of Boeing. Sean logging with the position that Spirit is in currently and the options being considered.
Mike, Rachel, the main supplier of Boeing, feeling the concussive hits this year to Boeing with concerns over its plane's safety and quality, and a nearly 2-month-long machinist union strike in Washington coming to an end this week. Here at Spirit AeroSystems, available cash is getting tight. It's a phrase repeated over and over in Spirit AeroSystems' latest SEC filing. Quote, substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue as a going concern exists.
If there's concerns about them being able to move forward, they have to note that in these reports.
It's about meeting financial obligations. The filing says toward the end of September, Spirit's debts totaled more than $4.4 billion, and the company's cash was about $218 million. The filing says, quote, the company will require additional liquidity to continue its operations over the next 12 months.
You can't really talk about Spirit without talking about Boeing. And both of these organizations have been playing with fire.
Dr. Larry Straub at Newman University says both have been using up a lot of resources, namely cash.
Normally you'd sit there and say, well, Spirit's, threatened about their going concern status. Well, that won't be a big deal when Boeing takes them under their wing and they absorb them into their organization. Well, that would be the case if Boeing were on a strong footing right now. Obviously, they're weakened.
Spirit in the filing says management is considering options to shore up cash, but are dealing with factors like the timing of the merger with Boeing, 737 deliveries, and the long-term impact of the Boeing strike, along with possibly considering additional options like customer advances, debt financing, and operational changes, including layoffs and more furloughs.
Spirit and I think Boeing are both going to feel tremendous pressure. They've got to get a tourniquet on this thing. They're bleeding, and they're bleeding pretty badly right now.
We also got a statement from Spirit AeroSystems in regard to this recent filing, saying from a spokesperson, we retain a range of options and levers to address our financial and spacing constraints and are working with our customers on these matters.
Sean, thank you.